Hiding behind a leafy houseplant in our living room, I unexpectedly learned the truth about my husband. Crouched behind the thick leaves at the stroke of midnight, I watched as Chase paced relentlessly, his phone glued to his ear. My name is Willa, and up until that moment, I believed I had a firm grasp on my life. As an elementary school teacher, married to a man I thought was faithful and expecting our first child, life seemed straightforward. Yet life has its ways of upending certainties when you least expect it. "Look, Mom, Douglas's death changes everything," Chase whispered covertly into his phone, oblivious to my presence. "Willa is too overwhelmed right now to see the big picture about the inheritance." "This is our opportunity," he asserted. Clamping a hand over my mouth, I stifled a gasp. My father had only been gone for 2 weeks, and here was my husband, scheming about my inheritance under the cloak of night. "No, listen," he continued, his voice adopting that suave, convincing tone that I once found endearing. "Once the shares are transferred, we can advocate for a quick sale. The company is valued in the millions. Willa doesn't need to be bogged down with the details until everything is finalized." My legs began to ache from squatting, but the shock rooted me in place. I had initially come downstairs for a glass of water, but Chase's secretive whispers halted me cold. "Of course I feel terrible about it," he admitted, threading his fingers through his hair, a gesture I now recognized as calculated rather than anxious. "But think about the benefit. We could clear your and Dad's debts. Purchase that house in Palm Springs you've always dreamt of." The room seemed to tilt slightly. I braced myself against the wall, my other hand instinctively cradling my barely noticeable bump. After 5 years of marriage, this was a side of Chase I had never heard before. Cold, calculating, almost predatory. "Let's keep this between us for now," he continued. "I've already discussed the legal aspects with Leonard. We just need to find the perfect moment to broach this with Willa. You know how sentimental she is about her father's legacy. My father's legacy was precious to me, born out of his passion and perseverance. He built his automotive empire from scratch, dedicating 16-hour days to his business while reserving Sundays to teach me piano. His principles of hard work and integrity were his gifts to me." As Chase ended the call and headed upstairs, these thoughts overwhelmed me with their weight. I remained concealed until his footsteps disappeared, leaving my intended glass of water forgotten. The moonlight that poured through the bay windows suddenly seemed to cast a stark light on our surroundings, especially on the lavish furniture Chase had persuaded us to acquire. Furniture bought, I now understood, with my family's money. A buzz from my phone interrupted my spiraling thoughts. It was Jenna, my best friend from college. "Can't sleep? Saw you were online. Everything okay?" Her message read. I paused, unsure how to condense the night's revelations into a text. How could I explain that the man I was married to, the father of my unborn child, was plotting against me? That he was not the man I thought I loved, but a schemer dressed in a convincing facade? Instead, I typed out a message, "Need to talk. Breakfast tomorrow? Important." Her reply was immediate, usual place, 7 a.m. Should I be worried? As I looked around the living room, my eyes landed on the photos depicting our supposedly idyllic life. Our honeymoon in Bali, our wedding where Chase's vows had moved everyone to tears, and numerous family gatherings where he had played the perfect son-in-law. "Not worried," I responded, "just angry and planning." The next morning, as I sat across from Jenna at our favorite breakfast spot, I tore a napkin into shreds, channeling my agitation while I recounted the ordeal. The cafe hummed with its usual morning activity, yet the only sound that echoed in my mind was Chase's voice from the night before, coldly outlining his plot. "That manipulative bastard," Jenna exclaimed after a moment, her legal instincts flaring up. "Have you checked your joint account?" Nodding in response to Jenna's query about my personal accounts, I quickly retrieved my phone. "Already checked. Everything looks normal so far," I murmured just as a new text from Chase lit up the screen. "Having lunch with Mom and Dad today. They want to discuss some investment opportunities for the inheritance. Join us." My stomach twisted in response. They were advancing their plans quicker than I had anticipated. "They're already making moves," I whispered, showing Jenna the text. She leaned back, her expression pensive. "You know, it's intriguing. Chase's law firm specializes in corporate acquisition. I did some digging after your call." "What are you implying, though?" I asked, a sense of dread creeping in. "I'm suggesting that this scheme might involve more than just Chase and his parents. Have you noticed any unfamiliar faces around your father's company recently?" Before I could respond, the chime of the cafe door interrupted us. Maureen's voice, unmistakable and carrying, halted my word. "Willa, what a surprise!" she called out as she approached, her designer purse swinging by her side. "Just having breakfast with Jenna," I replied, striving to keep my voice even. "How are you?" "Oh, I'm splendid. And look at you, so pregnant and radiant." Maureen exclaimed, reaching out to pat my stomach without invitation. Chase mentioned you might join us for lunch. We have some thrilling plans to discuss. Feeling Jenna's foot nudge mine under the table, a silent cue to maintain composure, I countered. Actually, I have a doctor's appointment, just a routine checkup. But surely you can reschedule. This involves your future, your baby's future. Maureen pressed, her smile fixed, but her eyes sharpening. The baby's future is precisely why I can't miss it, I retorted, hastily gathering my belongings. Perhaps next time. As we exited the cafe, Jenna clutched my arm. That was no coincidence. She was definitely checking on you. Chase could be tracking your location through your shared account. A chill ran down my spine as realization dawned. I need to update my privacy settings. You need to do more than that, Jenna insisted with gravity. It's crucial you safeguard yourself legally before they make any moves on the company share. My phone buzzed again, another message from Chase. Mom said she saw you at breakfast. Everything okay? You seem distant lately. His words, once a source of warmth, now felt like cold, calculated scripts from someone else entirely. I don't know how much longer I can pretend everything's normal, I confessed to Jenna, the weight of each day's facade growing heavier. Every time he touches me or asks about the baby, it makes my skin crawl. Then stop pretending, Jenna advised firmly. Let him believe you're consumed with grief over your dad. It'll give us the time we need to uncover their full plan. As if on cue, my phone rang. A call from my mother, Lorraine. I switched it to speaker, Jenna's gaze locking with mine in shared apprehension. Honey, are you sitting down? My mother began, her voice strained with urgency. I've just learned something alarming about Chase's firm. My heart raced as she disclosed. Remember the merger your dad vehemently opposed before his passing? Well, guess who's representing the buyer? It all came together, horrifyingly fast. This battle wasn't just over inheritance, it was an assault on my father's legacy itself. And Chase had been orchestrating it from the shadow. I have to go, I announced abruptly. I need to act before Chase suspects anything. But first, a crucial stop. I'm heading to the bank. What will you do? Jenna asked, a mix of worry and determination in her eyes. Reflecting on Chase's deceit, Maureen's manipulative maneuvers, and my father's aspirations, resolve hardened within me. I'm going to safeguard what's rightfully mine, I declared. And then I'm going to ensure they regret ever underestimating me. After days of covertly gathering evidence within the walls of my own home, my diligence was rewarded. In Chase's home office, I discovered the evidence, a stack of documents including merger proposals, confidential correspondences, and preliminary contracts, all predating my father's death. The emblem of Bennett Associates emblazoned atop each document mocked me, the firm my husband had allied himself with for years. As I grasped the papers, the office door creaked ominously behind me. As I turned sharply, Chase stood in the doorway, his features betraying no emotion. Looking for something in particular? He inquired, his tone unsettlingly serene. Clutching the incriminating documents, I confronted him. How long has this been in the works? Before or after my father fell ill? It's not what you assume, Willa, he replied, stepping inside and shutting the door softly behind. The merger is necessary to save the company. Necessary? My voice broke with emotion. My father built that company from the ground up, and he trusted you. You say you're protecting his legacy? Chase advanced, attempting to take my hand, but I recoiled, bumping against his desk. The industry is shifting. Without this merger, the company won't last another 5 years. Stop, I said firmly, placing a hand over my stomach as I felt a flutter from the babe. Don't frame this as a protective measure. This is about your profit, not preservation. His expression turned stern. You're being overly emotional. It's just the pregnancy hormone. Don't you dare use that against me, I snapped, the pent-up fury unleashing. I've seen the transfer documents, Chase. They're all set for my signature. Were you planning to forge that as well? A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, not guilt, but irritation at being discovered. Your father's passing necessitated quick action. We? I scoffed. You mean you and your parent? How much are they gaining from this? Our heated exchange was cut short by the sound of the front door. Chase! Willa! Maureen's voice called out, tinged with cheerfulness. Chase seized my arm, his grip firm. Don't cause a scene. Think of the baby. Pulling away sharply, I retorted, I am thinking about the baby. As Maureen appeared in the doorway, her smile wavered upon noticing the documents in my grip. Oh, are those the merger papers? Splendid, we can go over them during lunch. Actually, I said, standing taller, a fabricated confidence in my voice. I've just spoken with the board members. Chase's face drained of color. Interestingly, none of them seem aware of these negotiations. Leonard interjected with his typical suavity, stepping forward. Now, Willa, sometimes business decisions are complex. The doctor cleared her throat, her expression concerned. Mrs. Bennett, Harper, I corrected her without missing a beat, my decision firm. I'm returning to my maiden name. It's M.S. Harper. Now, Ms. Harper, your blood pressure is worryingly high, especially for being 24 weeks along. I recommend bed rest for at least a week. A week? I exclaimed, panic rising. The crucial merger vote was only 5 days away. I can't, my mother interjected sharply. She'll do it at my house. Meanwhile, my phone vibrated with a new message, this time from Leonard. Think about the impact on the family. Chase is shattered. We need to discuss this maturely. As the doctor left to arrange my discharge papers, my mother's voice, filled with both concern and frustration, broke the silence. Why didn't you tell me things had escalated this far? Admitting it aloud makes it too real, I confessed, pressing my hands against my belly, soothing the stir of movement from my daughter. Did you know Chase was conspiring with Carlton Industries even before Dad fell ill? They've been orchestrating this takeover for months. That's why you need to step away, she urged. Let Jenna and the legal team manage it. You need to focus on your health and the baby. A sudden knock at the door startled us. Chase stood there, his suit crisp, his face etched with calculated concern, the epitome of a worried spouse. Thank God, he breathed, stepping into the room. Get out, my mother's voice was icy, sharp enough to cut. I have every right to be here. That's my child. The same child you were ready to exploit as a smokescreen while you plundered her inheritance? My mother rose. Her stature small, but her presence immense. The very stress you're causing is endangering her and the baby. Chase's mask faltered slightly. Willa, please, whatever you think I've done. I've uncovered the offshore accounts, I interjected quietly. The impact of my words settled heavily in the room. Dad suspected foul play before his death. He had investigators on it. That struck a nerve. Chase's expression blanked, an unmistakable sign of, you're bluffing. Without a word, I retrieved my phone and displayed the email from my father's attorney that had arrived that morning. Interested in seeing the proof? The transfers, the meetings with Carlton's CEO, did you honestly think Dad wouldn't safeguard his life's work? Everything I did for us, Chase claimed, his gaze flickering towards the door, betraying his desperation. For our future, Mrs. Harper. A nurse entered with a wheelchair ready to escort me out. We're ready to discharge. I'll get the car, my mother declared, her glare towards Chase so fierce it could peel paint off the walls. As soon as she exited, Chase stepped closer, his voice a threatening whisper. Think carefully about your next steps. One phone call from me, and your inheritance could vanish. I met his gaze, seeing him clearly for the first time, recognizing the facade where I once saw fortitude. And one call from me to the SEC, and those offshore accounts won't be a secret anymore. Want to see whose call causes more damage? The nurse waited by, her presence a silent witness. As Chase adjusted his tie, a clear signal of his discomfort. This isn't the end, he muttered. You're right, I agreed, accepting the nurse's assistance into the wheelchair. It's just the start. As I was wheeled out, a vibration from my phone caught my attention. A message from Jenna. Found something major in the merger documents. Chase isn't the only one involved. There's a bigger player. I closed my eyes, fatigue washing over me. One battle at a time. My immediate priority was my daughter's safety. Unraveling the conspiracy against my father's company would come next. Ready to go home? My mother asked as we approached her car. No, I replied. The thought of the home I shared with Chase, now a hollow shell filled with luxurious deceptions, chilling my heart. But I am ready to fight back. 3 days into my recuperation at my mother's house, Leonard Bennett appeared unannounced. From the upstairs window, I watched him charm his way past our housekeeper, his briefcase in hand, flashing that expensive practice smile that convinced my father to hire Chase years ago. You don't have to meet him, my mother cautioned, her voice laced with protectiveness. Actually, I do, I insisted, smoothing my shirt over my belly, signaling I wasn't facing him alone. Minutes later, Leonard sat across from me in my mother's study, Jenna at my side, my mother a vigilant figure by the fireplace. This situation has escalated too far, Leonard opened, his briefcase snapping open. I propose a solution beneficial for all. Like the scheme to sell my father's company without his knowledge? My voice remained calm, echoing Jenna's earlier advice. Leonard presented a document. Carlton Industries proposes to retain the current management. It would preserve your father's legacy. While Chase secures his commission and you settle your gambling debts, I shot back, seeing his smile waver. Leonard bristled, rising from his seat, but my mother's stern command halted him. Sit down, Leonard. You're not manipulating your way out of this one. Leonard sat back down, visibly flustered as he adjusted his tie. Chase loves you, Willa. This stress, the pregnancy, it's clouding your judgment. Jenna swiftly interjected, sliding a folder across the table. On the contrary, Willa is seeing things more clearly than ever. These are cease and desist orders for you, Chase, and Maureen. Any further attempts to contact Willa will lead to harassment charges. Leonard's composed facade shattered. You ungrateful! His outburst was cut short by a knock at the door. The housekeeper peeked in, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Bennett insists on seeing you. Before we could respond, Maureen barged in, mascara smeared across her cheeks. How could you do this to Chase? His firm has suspended him. The firm suspended him for breaching ethics, Jenna explained calmly. That's standard procedure when someone is caught conspiring to defraud shareholders. We were only trying to help, Maureen cried out, her voice breaking. That company is floundering. Chase was trying to save it. By orchestrating a covert takeover? I stood up, my patience snapping. By exploiting my father's death? Leonard lost all pretense of diplomacy. Your father was a fool. He missed opportunities to sell and prosper. He was too stubborn. Get out, my mother commanded, her voice sharp as ice. Both of you, leave my house now. This isn't over, Leonard hissed, hastily collecting his documents. You have no idea what you're up against. Actually, I do, I countered, pulling out my phone. I played the recording of the conversation. Leonard's complexion turned ashen. You can't use that. Watch me, Beau, I said, stepping toward him, my rage no longer contained. You exploited my father's death, my pregnancy, my trust. Now I will use everything at my disposal to ensure you, Chase, and anyone else involved faces justice. After they departed, Jenna gently touched my arm. Are you okay? We need to keep an eye on your blood pressure. I'm fine, I lied, my mind racing. What did you discover about Carlton Industries? Jenna hesitated, then spoke. You were right about Chase not being the puppet master. It's your father's former partner, the one who left the business 15 years ago. My mother gasped. James Carlton? But he and your father were like brothers. Memories of James Carlton, once a family friend who attended my recitals and taught me chess, now twisted into a narrative of deep betrayal. The realization struck me like a physical blow. He approached Chase 2 years ago, Jenna elaborated, using him to extract sensitive information about the company's vulnerabilities. I collapsed into a chair, my hand instinctively resting on my belly. My daughter stirred as if reacting to my turmoil. So Chase was not just complicit. He was manipulated, I murmured. A willing participant, my mother corrected gently. My eyes drifted to the chess set in the corner, a gift from James Carlton on my 16th birthday. It's time to sever his strings. I turned to Jenna. How soon can we convene a meeting with the board? Willa, my mother interjected with a concerned look. The doctor mentioned avoiding stress, I countered, standing firmly. But reclaiming what's rightfully mine is the only way to alleviate my stress. The boardroom of Harper Industries felt unnervingly cold, perhaps due to the air conditioning, or maybe it was the icy demeanor of Chase, who sat flanked by James Carlton and unfamiliar lawyers at the far end of the table. My father's vacant chair at the head of the table loomed over the proceedings. Before we could start, James Carlton attempted a congenial tone. Let's acknowledge Willa's presence here today. Douglas would have been proud to see you so involved. An interesting choice of words, I shot back. Given your efforts to dismantle his legacy, Chase squirmed in his seat, and the board members, many of whom I had known since my youth, averted their gaze. The merger, James pressed on, attempting to regain control, is crucial for survival according to the market projection. They're fabricated, I interjected, distributing folders among the board members. Much like the manipulation of the company's stock prices over recent months. A hush fell over the room. Chase's complexion turned a ghostly pale. That's a grave accusation, James retorted, his smile now strained. It's not an accusation, I stated confidently, nodding at Jenna, who promptly opened her laptop. It's substantiated with evidence. My father suspected market tampering, which is why he initiated an investigation before his passing. Chase stood abruptly, his voice tinged with desperation. This is absurd. She's being irrational. Sit down, Chase, James snapped, losing his composure for the first time. Mrs. Harper, these so-called conspiracies are well documented here, I continued undeterred, including your covert meetings with Chase, the offshore accounts, and the shell corporations used to acquire stock. At that moment, the boardroom door swung open. My mother entered, flanked by 2 SEC agents. What is the meaning of this? James demanded. This, I declared, steadying myself on trembling legs, is the consequence of underestimating a determined pregnant woman armed with her father's meticulous record. Time seemed to distort, stretching out each second into an eternity. James made a desperate grab for Jenna's laptop, sparking chaos. Chase's protest that he was being framed echoed around the room as the SEC agent sprang into action. Amid the turmoil, a sharp pain seized my abdomen, debilitating and sharp. "Willa?" My mother's voice reached me, sounding distant. I clutched the edge of the table, my vision speckled with black dot. The baby. My surroundings became a blur. I was dimly aware of being eased into a chair, the room filled with a cacophony of voices, Jenna urgently calling for an ambulance. Chase's voice cut through, bitter and accusing. "This is your fault. If you hadn't forced this issue—" "My fault?" I managed to retort, despite the pain twisting through me. "You betrayed everything. Our marriage, my father's trust, our daughter's future. I did it for us." Chase's facade shattered under the strain. "James promised me a partnership, control over the merged entity. We could have had everything but integrity," I managed to say, another wave of pain coursing through me. James Carlton's composed voice declared, "This meeting is clearly disrupted. Given Mrs. Harper's condition, the meeting continues," my mother interrupted firmly. "The SEC has what they need, and Willa has already granted me proxy powers in case of an emergency." I tried to muster a smile at their astonished faces, but the escalating pain overwhelmed me. Paramedics streamed in, bombarding me with questions that jumbled in my fogged mind. "The baby will be okay," Jenna reassured me, her hand a comforting pressure on mine. "Let us handle things now." As I was wheeled from the boardroom, I caught a last glimpse of the scene. Chase stood motionless, his dreams disintegrating around him. James Carlton, his demeanor of a benevolent elder long gone, was restrained in handcuffs. My mother occupied my father's chair, an unyielding pillar of strength against those who had sought to dismantle our family's legacy. In the ambulance, amidst the flux of pain and fear, my thoughts drifted to my father. I contemplated integrity, legacy, and what truly holds value when all else is stripped away. "Your blood pressure is alarmingly high," the paramedic noted, snapping me back to the present. "Try to stay calm," they advised. But how could I when my marriage was disintegrating, my father's company teetered on the brink, and my unborn child's health was at risk? I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by isolation. "Dad," I whispered into the silence, "I could really use your guidance now." 3 days post-hospital scare, I sat in my father's home office, enveloped by the legacy he had built, when Chase entered unexpectedly. His appearance was disheveled, unshaven, suit crumpled, the once immaculate exterior completely vanished. "You shouldn't be here, Tia," I said, my hand instinctively guarding my belly. The doctors had staved off premature labor, but stability felt like a distant memory. "James Carlton was arrested this morning," Chase said, his voice breaking. "The SEC is freezing assets. It's being called the largest case of corporate fraud in state history." "I'm aware," I responded calmly, having signed off on the final statements just an hour earlier. He stepped forward, his desperation palpable. "Willa, please, I need to explain. Can you justify why you plotted against my father as he lay dying? Why you used our marriage, our future child, as a facade for your schemes?" "I did it out of fear," he blurted. "Do you understand the pressure of being Douglas Harper's son-in-law? Nothing I ever did seemed adequate. So, you chose to undermine everything he valued," I said, seeing him truly for the first time. "I needed to prove I could stand beyond just being your husband," Chase confessed, his fingers nervously combing through his hair. "James promised me autonomy over the merged enterprise, actual power, rather than just basking in the residual glow of the Harper legacy. And now you've lost everything." He dropped to his knees beside my chair, reaching out. "We could still salvage this. The prosecutors are willing to strike a deal if I testify against James." "Stop!" I cut him off, pulling an envelope from my father's desk drawer. I discovered this in Dad's safe, dated just 2 days before he passed. Chase froze as I unfolded the letter. "Dear Willa," I began reading aloud, my voice steady despite the storm within. "If you are reading this, then my fears about Chase and James have indeed materialized. I'm sorry I won't be there to help you face this, but I know you're stronger than anyone, including yourself, realizes," I read from my father's letter. my voice steadying with each word. He was aware of the deceit surrounding him. He had left this message for me to unearth the truth and trust my own instinct. Your father was a stubborn old man who built something substantial and real. Chase tried to interject, but I silenced him. While you and James plotted against him, he was teaching me how to safeguard his legacy. Chase stood, his composed exterior finally crumbling. So that's it? Our history together means nothing? It meant everything to me, I replied, placing the letter back in the drawer. That's precisely why your betrayal was so effective. The company will fail without the merger, he said, clinging to his last shred of hope. I allowed myself a slight smile. While you were entangled in your schemes, I secured new investments. Our European partners have agreed to modernize our production line. The board already approved the plan this morning. His face lost all color. James told you they weren't interested? I asked. He lied, just as you did. Standing up slowly, supporting myself against the desk, I continued. The divorce papers and my statement to the SEC are with my lawyer. You're going to destroy me? The father of your child? His tone was icy. No, Chase, you orchestrated your own downfall. I headed for the door, then paused, glancing back. My father left a message for you too. I watched as he unfolded the note, his hands shaking, and read the single line. I gave you a chance to choose integrity. You chose greed. Chase's hands tightened around the crumpled paper, his world unraveling. Willow, wait! He pleaded. Goodbye, Chase. I stepped out to where Jenna and my mother were waiting. The SEC agents in the living room will want to discuss those offshore accounts with you. As we departed, Chase's calls filled the air of the home where I had grown up, fallen in love, and now where I had reclaimed my strength. Are you okay? My mother asked tenderly. I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling my daughter's strong kicks. We will be. We both will be. 6 months later, I stood in what was once my father's office, now mine, cradling my newborn daughter, watching Harper Industries stock prices ascend on the digital ticker. The European partnership had exceeded all expectations, revitalizing the company to unprecedented strength. As I reflected on this success, a knock at the door brought me back to the present. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, Jenna announced, her gaze drifting to the baby in my arms. How's little Douglas doing? She prefers Dougie, I corrected with a smile, gently adjusting my daughter's position. And she's already taking an interest in the quarterly reports. The newspaper on my desk caught my eye, a small headline detailing Chase's sentencing. 3 years, reduced from 5 due to his cooperation against James Carlton. His parents had escaped to Florida, their trail marked by unpaid debts and shattered connections. Have you read his letter? Jenna inquired, noting my glance at the paper. I nodded toward the unopened envelope on my desk. The handwriting I once knew so well now seemed alien. Some things are better left unsaid. My mother appeared at the doorway, impeccably dressed and ready to perform her duties as interim CEO. Ready? The board needs your final approval on the modernization proposal. As I collected my documents, a photo slipped from my father's old diary. Him and me at my first piano recital, both of us beaming. Written behind it, in his script, success isn't about winning, Willa. It's about knowing what's worth fighting for. He would be proud, my mother murmured, observing the scene. Not just of the company's survival, but how you preserved it. Without seeking revenge, I added, the realization dawning on me. That was his lesson. Anyone can destroy, but building something worthwhile, that's the true victory. The boardroom felt transformed as I entered. New faces mingled with familiar ones, embodying the evolution of our core value. As Dougie slept quietly in her carrier beside me, I reflected on the cycles of betrayal and redemption, of endings and beginning. Before we begin, I addressed the board. I'd like to announce a new initiative. We're establishing the Douglas Harper Foundation for Ethics in Business, offering full scholarships to students who exemplify integrity and innovation. The nod of approval from the seasoned board members and the understanding looks from the newer ones affirmed this direction. This, I realized, was how you build a legacy, not by tearing others down, but by fostering opportunities for betterment. After the meeting, I discovered another note from my father, hidden inside his old desk calendar. Hardest part of success isn't achieving it, it's deciding what kind of person you want to be once you're there. My phone buzzed with a text from Maureen. Chase asked about the baby. Please, just one photo. I deleted the message without replying. Some bridges remain burned. Not out of spite, but because forging new paths is more fruitful. MS Harper, my assistant announced, breaking my reverie. The new production line supervisors are here for their training, and your mother suggested scheduling piano lessons for when Dougie's older. I smiled at the thought of those Sunday afternoons with my father at the piano, his gentle guidance as I stumbled through each melody. Arrange both appointments, I instructed, and set up weekly ethics seminars for all management levels. Later, as Dougie and I drove past the house where Chase and I once lived, I noticed its transformation. New paint, different flowers, a reflection of my own evolution. At a red light, I finally felt ready to read Chase's letter. Unfolding the paper, I found just one line. "I'm sorry I chose wrong." I let the slip flutter out the car window, watching it dissolve into the evening breeze. Dougie stirred in her seat, her small hand clasping my finger with unexpected strength. "Ready to go home, little one?" I asked her, envisioning the piano in our new house and the many Sunday afternoons ahead, filled with music and quiet lessons on integrity. The traffic light shifted to green and we continued on, leaving behind the remnants of the past. It was not about forgetting, but about transforming those memories into lessons, shaping a legacy that was about wisdom and resilience far richer than any tale of retribution.